The ring of the phone on a Sunday morning felt like a blow that changed everything. "Adele, darling," Mum said, her voice soft, almost gentle, but with that familiar, chilling edge. "We're completely booked for Christmas. Marissa has already invited all her friends and family. Perhaps next year." I froze, holding the phone in my hand. No explanation, no regret, just a dry refusal sounding like a sentence. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I sank onto the sofa, wrapping my arms around my knees, and let myself have a minute of quiet. But the quiet wasn't comforting. It was painful, familiar, and unsettling. I remembered all the times I'd let Mum and Dad off the hook when they'd brushed me aside for Uncle David's gatherings. Every time they said I'd declined, they'd tell David. I'd always smoothed things over, forced a smile, and said it's fine, even though a burning resentment simmered inside me. Every time I felt like a victim, but also, somehow, complicit. Uncle David, Mum's brother, had always been a straight-talking man. He'd built a successful business from nothing, and he'd once given my parents a share of his company to help them succeed. But they barely did anything themselves, using it as proof of their status, and his generosity became a chance to show how important they were. Uncle David had called them liars and snobs more than once, but I always covered for them, afraid of shattering the carefully constructed illusion of family they'd so expertly maintained. "It'll be fine without me anyway," I whispered, almost to myself. "Time to make my own Christmas." I stood up, walked to the window, and watched the snow falling softly on the empty streets of my neighborhood. In that moment, I realized I couldn't hide anymore. I couldn't keep justifying their lies. For years, Mum and Dad had refused to see me as I truly was, believing a superficial harmony was more important than my feelings. And this time, I knew I had to put a stop to it. In childhood, I always witnessed Uncle David's simmering frustration with my parents. He never disguised his disdain. It was a constant current beneath the surface of their carefully curated world. "Mary, John," he'd say, his voice sharp, "stop pretending. You're presenting a facade of perfect family, but it's nothing more than a charade." Each time my parents tried to conceal their indifference towards me, they'd tell him I didn't want to come. And foolishly believing I was protecting their reputation, I'd close my eyes and let their deception slide. It seemed better than shattering the world they'd built, a world where they were happy, and I was simply the bad daughter. But time, as it always does, revealed the truth. Their love had always been conditional, a fragile thing dependent on my adherence to their rules and my ability to conform to their expectations. They made me feel superfluous, and each holiday where I was merely on the schedule served as a painful reminder that I was nothing more than a prop in their carefully constructed illusion. And now, the ring of my mother's voice was the final, unbearable crack. They'd refused to invite me again, not for the first time. And this time, I wouldn't offer excuses. I understood with a sudden clarity that it was time to act for myself, for my principles, for the Christmas that would finally, truly be mine. I sat at my desk, opened my notebook, and began to write a plan. With each line, my heart found a measure of peace, and with it, a burgeoning sense of anticipation. Gather those who remain outside the celebration, the solitary neighbors, friends, colleagues without family or support. Let this be a day where every person matters. I'd never before considered Christmas with such seriousness. For my parents, it was merely a performance. Sparkling lights, meticulously arranged decorations, mugs emblazoned with perfect family. A photograph for display. Each year, I'd striven to conform to their carefully curated image. Smiling, acquiescing, sitting in the correct chair, a small figure on their meticulously staged chessboard. But now, everything would be different. I resolved that this Christmas would be real, bright, warm, vibrant, and genuinely so. Without pretense, without comparison or judgment. My gaze fell upon an old photo album. Festive dinners, gleaming china, my parents at the center of attention, Marissa radiating control. And me always in the background, a moving figure serving dishes, clearing up after everyone. "Enough," I whispered to myself. I opened my phone and began to type messages. First, to volunteers, friends, neighbors. I wanted the celebration to be expansive, welcoming, yet intimate. "Adele," I spoke aloud, If they want a little play, let them remain in their theater. I will create a true Christmas." And in that moment, I understood that it was time to reveal the whole truth to Uncle David. He deserved to know that my parents had lied to him for years, that I'd never refused to come, and that they'd used his generosity for their own vanity. I opened my laptop and typed a letter. "Uncle David, it's time you knew the truth about the Christmas in our parents' home. I will no longer shield them from their lies, and I will no longer excuse their selfishness." Inside, a fire ignited, a confluence of anger, release, and unyielding resolve. I understood that this step might shatter their familiar world, but that world was a carefully constructed illusion. The following days unfolded in a whirlwind of planning. I secured a charming country house, one I'd always dreamed of for seasonal gatherings, and began transforming it into a space of warmth and joy. Long tables, twinkling lights, flickering candles, the comforting scent of cinnamon and orange, everything had to be perfect, yet undeniably authentically alive. I compiled a guest list, the solitary neighbors my parents had never acknowledged, colleagues whose families lived far away and who typically spent the holidays alone, friends deprived of the warmth of a hearth, a handful of children from the local shelter who had never known the true meaning of Christmas. Each invitation was deeply personal. I wrote from the heart, explaining that they had a place at my table. Unlike my parents, I didn't select based on status. I chose those who needed a little light. As evenings descended, I sifted through old family photographs. Marissa, radiant and meticulously orchestrating every detail, my mother and father, perpetually concerned with their public image. And me, always on the periphery, unseen, though I poured my entire heart into crafting the celebrations. "This year, everything will be different," I whispered to myself, and I knew I had to tell Uncle David the truth. He deserved to hear it. My parents had lied to him for far too many years, exploiting his generosity to bolster their own carefully constructed success. The share of his business he'd gifted them had always been a symbol of trust and support, a generosity they'd parasitized, doing nothing themselves. The preparations were in full swing, a whirlwind of activity. I'd been ordering everything: groceries, pastries, decorations. I was hunting for volunteers and friends who would be willing to help set the table, deck the halls, and welcome our guests. I really wanted to create a space where everyone felt like they were part of the celebration, not just a prop for a photo opportunity. My parents, of course, had no idea about any of this. I wanted them to just come, see, and truly feel that I could conjure a more joyful, vibrant Christmas than they ever had. But I decided to keep the whole thing a secret from them. If they think they can control, dismiss, and manipulate, I told myself, then this year they'll see the real magic of Christmas, not their carefully constructed, and frankly, rather hollow performance. The house on the edge of town stood amidst towering pines, already draped in a fresh blanket of snow. From the first glance, it seemed empty and quiet, but for me, it was a blank canvas, the space where I intended to paint my own Christmas story. I pushed open the doors, and the scent of aged wood mingled with the crisp fragrance of pine. The first strands of fairy lights lay scattered across the floor, their gentle glow flickering softly in the light of the evening street lamps. I arranged candles on the window sills, the tables, and in the hearth, imagining the warm shimmer they'd cast into the frosty winter night. "Let's start with the kitchen," I told our assembled helpers. Maria, a longtime friend and colleague in design, began laying out the decorative linens, carefully ensuring that each pattern harmonized with the colors of the lights. Jake, my neighbor and a man with a knack for everything, brought over platters and serving dishes, helping to secure the long table for our guests. We began preparing the food, as if conducting an orchestra. I slid the turkey into the oven, brushing it with oil and herbs, allowing the rich aroma to permeate the entire house. Maria baked pies, her hands moving with such deftness that the dough seemed to rise and shape itself perfectly on its own. Jake, alongside the others, chopped vegetables, crafted sauces, and simmered the gravy, our laughter mixing with the playful experimentation of spices. The air filled with the warm, comforting scents of cinnamon, rosemary, and cloves. We meticulously adjusted the tables and chairs, ensuring not a single one wobbled, striving to create a space where every guest would feel completely at ease. I placed small decorations and name cards, though I knew many of our guests would arrive without assigned seats, and that truly was wonderful. The core element was simply this: everyone felt welcomed. In the corner of the house, I hung the fairy lights on the Christmas tree, alongside old toys and family heirlooms passed down through generations. But unlike the celebrations of my parents' family, here everything felt alive. The decorations weren't simply for show. They told stories and breathed an authentic atmosphere of Christmas into the space. We were preparing desserts: pies, cookies, chocolate truffles. With every bite of dough, every swirl of frosting, laughter echoed through the kitchen. I watched and I understood. This Christmas wasn't about status or perfect photographs. It was about warmth, joy, and genuine care. "Adele, look," Maria said. "It feels like the house is coming to life." I smiled, gazing out at the windows, where the soft glow of the fairy lights reflected, and at the tables slowly transforming into festive feasts. In that moment, I realized that every corner of this house, every scent, every movement was a reflection of my own determined spirit. For the first time in years, I was creating a celebration not for the ambitions of others, but for the people I genuinely wanted to see happy. As evening descended and the cooking continued at a feverish pace, I lifted my gaze to the windows. Snow fell silently outside, and it seemed as though the entire world had paused, waiting for something truly magical to unfold. This year, Christmas belongs to me, I thought, feeling for the very first time a sense of ownership, that this celebration wasn't a performance for someone else's face. With the first twilight shadows creeping in, guests began to arrive at the house. The snow crunched beneath their boots, breaths forming fleeting clouds of vapor, and faces shone with anticipation. I opened the doors to each person, offering a smile and a familiar name. No one felt foreign. They came with a hopeful yearning for warmth and attention, and I knew that here they would find it. First to enter was Mrs. Harper, an elderly neighbor whose family had long since moved away, and who had spent her holidays alone. A tremor of emotion flickered in her eyes as she took in the tables laden with linens, the flickering candlelight, and the shimmering fairy lights. "Welcome home, Mrs. Harper," I said. "Thank you, my dear," she whispered, clutching my hand. "I've never felt part of a celebration until this moment." Then came colleagues, friends, and several solitary students who, for the first time in years, felt truly welcomed. The children from the orphanage shrieked with laughter as they darted through the house, their eyes alight with joy, and every corner filled with a chorus of giggles and delighted noise. In the kitchen, we continued the preparations. The final dishes were arranged on the tables, desserts adorned with berries and frosting. The air pulsed with the scent of fresh pastries, spices, and steaming hot chocolate. I watched my friends, their enthusiasm infectious, as they assisted me, one slicing vegetables, another arranging platters, a third stringing up garlands. They moved in a harmonious rhythm, like one large, loving family. "Look, Adele," Jake said. "The children are already settling at the tables, and the adults are helping each other with their plates. It's truly magical here." I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. Everything I had dreamed of was unfolding before my eyes. One by one, guests approached the windows and gazed at the snow falling on the decorated trees. There was a feeling as though time itself had paused, and the house itself was breathing with joy and light. I watched as simple gestures, a smile, a hand offered with a warm drink, a quiet "thank you," transformed the space into a genuine Christmas. In that moment, I realized that my parents had never understood that Christmas wasn't about porcelain gleam and perfectly posed photographs. It was about warmth, laughter, joy, and care. And this year, this celebration belonged to me, my friends, and all those who had been overlooked by my parents. The house was brimming with music, laughter, and the murmur of conversation. Every guest seemed to feel welcomed, and each place setting at the tables held a significance of its own. I moved between them, a quiet check ensuring every chair stood firm, that no one felt overlooked. It was the first time I truly felt like the hostess, not just a ghost in the background, but someone whose presence was genuinely felt. The house pulsed with laughter and light when a knock sounded at the door. I knew who it was. "It's Adele!" a familiar baritone announced. "I've come." Uncle David stood in the doorway, a smile playing on his lips, his eyes shimmering with surprise and delight. His gaze swept over the house long tables, flickering candles, garlands, faces alight with joy. "I've seen your messages," he said, embracing me. "You wrote that I wanted to know the truth. And frankly, I wasn't expecting you to do everything so beautifully." "I wanted you to see it with your own eyes," I replied, a touch of shyness mingling with pride. "This celebration is for everyone they ignored, for those who lingered on the periphery of their perfect world." Uncle David stepped inside, taking in the decorations, the guests, the laughter, the movement. "Adele," he said, "this is a true Christmas. I see care, joy, warmth. There's no hypocrisy here. You've surpassed all expectations." "Thank you, Uncle," I murmured, feeling a burgeoning sense of liberation within me. I no longer want to be a part of their play. We moved into the kitchen, where friends were laying out the final dishes. Uncle David embraced me and added quietly, "You've created more than just a celebration, Adele. You've built a family, where one never existed." Later that evening, as guests settled into their places and laughter filled the house, a phone rang. The parents' number flashed on the screen. "David, where are you?" A sharply irritated voice demanded. "Why haven't you come?" "Mary, John," he began calmly, but with a distinct firmness in his tone. "I need to tell you something. I've seen Adele's Christmas. I've witnessed her building a celebration for those you ignored. And now I know the truth. You didn't invite her because you considered her inconvenient." I watched as the guests listened intently to Uncle David's voice, standing beside him, my gaze unwavering. "You've exploited my generosity for your own image," he continued. "Your share of the business was a gift, but you've used it to project an air of success, doing nothing yourself. And you've deprived my daughter of holidays to maintain your perfect picture." "David," Mother faltered. "No, Mary, John," he cut her off. "Enough with the excuses. You've deceived me for all these years, claiming Adele didn't want to come, and now you're stripped of the ability to cover your actions." "And what will you do?" Father asked quietly, as if hoping for a way out. "I'm taking back my share," Uncle David stated firmly. "It can no longer be an excuse for your snobbery and selfishness. You've clung to this gift like a golden crutch, but the true value was in your labor, which was absent." Mother attempted to speak, but Uncle David intervened. "And never again use my daughter to conceal your own mistakes. You've forfeited her trust, and I'm forfeiting what you unjustly exploited." I stood beside him, feeling a tremendous weight lift from my shoulders after years of bearing it. My truth had been heard, my parents were held accountable, and Uncle David had acknowledged my courage. In that moment, I understood. Finally, I was free. The conversation with Uncle David had shifted something in the room. It wasn't a physical change. The chandeliers and candles were simply glowing with a soft, golden light. It was the light of release, of finally seeing things clearly. I drifted through the gathered guests, watching them laugh, share smiles, and talk with such genuine enthusiasm. There wasn't a single solitary face in the room, no one hiding their feelings or worried about being overlooked. Mrs. Harper was fussing over the children, handing out mugs of hot chocolate, while someone else was circulating with trays of pies. It was a beautiful mix of volunteers, friends, colleagues. Everyone felt like part of this thing, like everyone mattered. I heard a quiet "thank you" whispered to me, and bursts of laughter as someone told a silly little joke, pausing to steal a glance at another guest. Uncle David, sitting beside me at the table, gave me a squeeze on the shoulder. "Adele," he said, his voice full of pride, "you've created something truly special. None of Mom and Dad's fancy tablecloths could ever replace this warmth, this feeling of really caring about people." A warmth spread through me, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing, a warmth that didn't depend on anyone's approval. My eyes swept over the house, and it was as if it had come alive. Every table seemed to radiate joy, every candle flickered in the delighted faces of the guests. The children were tumbling around the Christmas tree, their laughter tinkling like tiny bells. The adults were sharing stories, talking about their families, and how long they'd felt unseen. Nobody felt like they were extra, because here, for the first time, that feeling simply didn't exist. "Adele," one of the neighbors said, I've never celebrated Christmas like this before. It's not that polite, forced smile. It's real family. And it hit me then, all the effort, all the hours spent preparing, all the worry, it had been worth it. My freedom, my truth. My work had created a celebration that meant something to everyone here. In that moment, I knew I wouldn't try to live up to anyone else's expectations anymore. I'd built my own Christmas, a place where no one is forgotten, where everyone feels valued, where love and kindness aren't tied to status or appearances. Uncle David smiled again, a knowing look in his eyes. "See, Adela," he said, "true strength isn't found in money or titles. It's in what you can give to others. You showed everyone today what it means to be a true host." I looked around at the guests, at their happy faces, and for the first time in a long time, I truly felt at home. A place where you didn't have to justify yourself, or hide the truth, or pretend to be someone you weren't. A place where I could just be and share my warmth and joy with everyone. "This Christmas," I whispered to myself, "is mine, and it will be like this every year." The house buzzed with laughter, music, and conversation late into the night. I wasn't a daughter hiding in the shadow of other people's dreams anymore. I was the host of this celebration, the creator of the light, the warmth, and the genuine happiness.